Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have a special edition for you here. This is off of peakprosperity.com, and the URL is in the description of the video if you'd like to take a look at it. The title of it is Mad as Hell: Why the Public is So Pissed Off. It says, if you want to understand why Trump won the recent U.S. presidential election, you can't overlook the economic data. If you do, his victory may look mighty confusing, alarming even. But once you understand the degree to which the average U.S. family and the entire Gen X and millennial generations are being completely hosed economically, everything starts to take shape. As most struggling Americans can tell you, real household income has gone nowhere for more than 20 years. And there's a chart here that you could take a look at in this article. It says this multi-decade burden of running ever faster same place is what led many U.S. voters to reject Hillary Clinton, the establishment candidate, and instead roll the dice on iconoclast promising to upend the system. But if Trump's plan to make America great again means a return to the 1980s and 1990s when median real incomes climbed smartly, he's not going to be able to pull that rabbit out of the hat, I'm afraid. None of the conditions in place then are with us today, including cheap, abundant energy. Remember, oil was $10 a barrel in 1998, not to mention that we were riding the tailwinds produced by all of the gains from the early explosive stage of the technologically and internet revolutions. Instead, we're at a stage where the pie is no longer expanding. It is now where those in power are using their advantage to continue to increase the size of their slice at the expense of the rest of us. The U.S. now routinely subjects its citizens to racketeering, charging excessive prices that are increasingly cumbersome to avoid. One example among thousands, a Viagra pill that costs less than $1 in India costs over $38 in the U.S. And there is a chart here that shows the cost of Viagra between Philadelphia, Miami, Minneapolis, Phoenix, and San Diego, and the stores they checked were Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, and Target. Said overall average per 50 milligram tablet comes to $38.25. Cell phone plans in the U.S. are 2 to 3 times more expensive and more limited in terms of both data and speed than any other countries I've traveled to in the past few years. A phone bill from AT&T in Hong Kong is a single page long and clearly explains how your unlimited high-speed plan ended up costing you around $30 a month. In contrast, my bill from the same company in the U.S. runs about 30 pages and seems intentionally opaque in helping me understand why I'm spending over $100 a month for a limited data plan with much slower speeds. There's no good reason for this except that the U.S. companies have learned that they can get away with predatory tactics by wearing down customers with gigantic, indecipherable billing statements. This is pure racketeering. Your phone carrier is counting on your cable company to be running the same complexity scam. Ditto, especially for all providers whom you just know in your heart will have to battle furiously with you or with for what you're owed should you ever need to really use that coverage. And it's not just corporations. The government's in on the action too. The U.S. tax code is now over 74,600 pages in length, and the IRS cannot even get close to answering questions accurately. Citizen is on the hook for getting everything exactly right or else incurring stiff penalties, necessitating the use of expensive CPAs, which is still no guarantee that the auditor's subjective judgment might go against you. In fact, during the first 26 years of its existence, the U.S. income tax code grew by 104 pages. Over the past 30 years, it's grown by 50,000 pages. To expand the code, as far as I know, nobody from the U.S. government agency has been at all interested in the obvious price conclusion displayed in this chart. And there's a chart here of rising insulin prices. And it shows that from July of 1996, they went from, well, roughly $20, $25 to over $250 July of 2016. It's 10 years. Believe it or not, there are two price lines on this chart, one red, one blue, from supposedly independent companies who are allegedly competing with each other, but most clearly are not. Humalog and Novolog are both manufacturers of injectable insulin. Insulin is an absolutely vital, non-substitutable necessity for people with diabetes, and these companies saw fit to collude and jack up the prices over 1,000% in 10 years, from $25 a vial to over $250. Why would two separate companies maintain the exact same price for their competing products for 20 years? I don't have any other explanation except for collusion. In any sane, rational, and caring nation, this wouldn't have happened. But under Bush and the Obama, such predatory behavior went completely uninvestigated, let alone punished. So it's no wonder then that so many people looked to the status quo candidacy of Hillary Clinton and said, no thanks. Many families cannot afford more years of status quo predation by the unchecked rapaciousness of the U.S. cartels or corporations and their government protectors. Look, we all knew that the faux recovery seen over the past 7 years has had to end sometime sooner or later. A recovery, mind you, that never eventually happened except in the fantasy press releases of the government statistical fabricators, lovingly reproduced by unquestioning journalists working for corporate entities harboring deep conflicts of interest. But the little people, hereby defined as those occupying the bottom 95% of the socioeconomic ladder, have long known screwed. Sadly, it's just getting worse. Obamacare, also known as the Affordable Health Care Act, is a disaster. We always knew it. It was going to be. Why? Because it represents the single largest giveaway to health insurance industry in our lifetime. And the DNC politician, or I'm sorry, Obama and the DC politicians crafted the Affordable Care Act as a monstrously large bill, and they failed to take on the biggest source of fat in the entire system, the health insurance companies themselves. Of course, these companies have very well-funded lobbyists, and pushing back against them on would have required real leadership and possibly cost some political capital. So they were left entirely alone with all these massive increases in healthcare premium costs left to be borne by somebody other than them. Turned out to be pretty much everyone. And there's an insert here. It says Obama benchmark premiums to rise 25% in sharpest jump yet. October 24th, 2017. Monthly premiums for benchmark silver level plans are going to up by an average of 25% in 38 states using the federal healthcare.gov website, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said in a report today. Last year, premiums for the second lowest cost silver plans went up by 7.5% on average across 37 states. Now, what's both fascinating and part of the electorate anger is that the same government that forced Obamacare on everyone is also the same government that swears that healthcare inflation is running only 2.5% to 3.5% per year over the past 5 years. And they have a chart here with the government numbers on this. I find myself wondering what country or planet those numbers are for, because for those who actually pay for their health insurance, the answer sure isn't America or Earth. In total, U.S. healthcare premiums have fully tripled since 1999. But for fun, using the government's own CPI med data from the table above, if healthcare premiums had tracked the government's state or stated rate of inflation between 2006 and 2015, then they would be some $2,500 less today than they actually are. Average actual worker and employer contributions to premiums and total premiums for family coverage 1999 to 2015 are shown in a chart here on this page if you want to pull the article up and take a look at it. And it shows in 1999, the average was $4,247 with employer contribution, and the workers, or let's see, let me try that again. The workers' contribution was $1,543. And 2015, the employer contribution, I've got it right, was $12,591, and the worker contribution was $4,955. People are angry because they're being lied to, or more accurately, lied to while being robbed. Even worse, while the rate of healthcare inflation is being understated at the individual premium level shown above, it's also wildly understated that in the larger inflation statistic used to level set everything from cost of living adjustment, or otherwise known as COLA, to pay raises across the country. As explained in the fuzzy numbers chapter of the crash course, even though healthcare spending is nearly 18% of GDP, for some reason healthcare comprises only 5.85% of the CPI basket. Currently, CPI med accounts for 5.85, or try that again, for 5.825% of the overall CPI. Increases in the share of medical expenses paid by individuals as opposed to their insurers will not affect CPI levels. U.S. healthcare spending grew 5.8% in 2015, reaching $3.2 trillion, or $9,990 per person. As a share of the nation's gross domestic product, health spending accounted for 17.8%. Does it make any sense to record something that's nearly 18% of GDP as only 5.8% of your inflationary experience? Nope, it sure doesn't. Unless your desire is to mask the actual rate of inflation. In simple terms, just healthcare's share of inflation alone comes to 0.25 plus 0.18, and they have it equaling 4.5%. That's more than twice the rate of the supposed total inflation we're experiencing all by itself. Throw in rising rents, car prices, and energy, and it's far more likely that the urban consumer is experiencing total price inflation closer to 6% or more per year. Now, if you were a government bean counter who wants to mask the rapidly rising factor within the nation's inflation rate, presumably to blunt the statistical damage and make things look rosier than they actually are, all you need to do is weight that item less in the basket used to calculate inflation. For example, if vegetables making up 18% of the cost of your shopping cart have gone up in price by a whopping 25%, that's going to leave a mark. But what the government does is pretend that your shopping cart 6% vegetables and increasing at a much lower rate, such as 3.2% annually. Voila! Reported price inflation for carrots and celery is now much lower, even though you're forking out 4.5% more at the grocery counter. The government is loudly telling everyone that you're only seeing an increase of 0.12%. This is infuriating, of course. Here's what it looks like in chart form. Total inflation is being sold to us as low, too low, and dangerously low, but I've helpfully included where the chart would show the total rate if only what we're seeing with the healthcare costs. And they got this chart here. It says change in core CPI and core PCP indexes, if you want to take a look at it. from 2000 to 2015. And it says, imagine how much bigger it would be if we added the actual inflation observed in other costly sectors like food, housing, and education. Obviously, there's something desperately wrong here. This is statistical lying and weaseling out of the worst sort, which of course everyone can see through because it gets harder and harder each year to balance the family budget. If you're alarmed by fake news, perhaps you should be more alarmed by fake data, something the US government has perfected and continues to perpetuate. All of this is deeply unfair, and surprise, people get annoyed when they're consistently lied to. Eventually, their trust goes right out the window. That a profoundly status quo candidate, HRC, could not sway the voters in rural America where these trends and insults are even more acutely felt than in urban areas. The status quo is figuratively and literally killing these people. As mentioned earlier, my family's healthcare premiums went up over 60% in cash costs alone this year. The rate of increase is even larger when the plan's reduced benefits and increased deductibles are factored in. The out-of-pocket amount for my family will be pretty close to $30,000 this year before any insurance actually kicks in. In other words, I'm subsidizing somebody. Unfortunately, that somebody is probably not a lower income person up the street who badly needs coverage, but rather someone in the C-suite at one of the major health companies. Check out the 2013 compensation packages for the CEOs of major health insurers. They're truly breathtaking. Joseph Swedish of WellPoint got $17 million, which is $49,853 a day. Stephen Hemsley of United Healthcare got $12.1 million, which is $35,484 a day. David Cordani of Cigna got $13.5 million, which is $39,589 a day. Michael Niedorf of Centene got $14.5 million, which is $42,560 a day. Mark Bertolini of Aetna, he got $30,000.7 million, which is $90,029 a day. Bruce Bowser of Humana, $8.8 million, $25,807 a day. Maybe 2013 was a standout year and is an errant data point. Maybe things moderated in 2014. Nope, everybody has apparently deserved even more massive payout. David Cordani of Cigna got $10,479 a day, which is $27.2 million. Michael Niedorf of Centene got $28.1 million, which is $107,796 a day. Bruce Bozard of Humana, $13.1 million, which is $50,319 a day. Stephen Helmsley, United Healthcare, $66.1 million, which is $254,328 per day. Mark Bertolini, $15 million, $57,740 per day. Joseph Swedish of Anthem, $8.1 million, which is $31,016 per day. That's their median earnings of full-time wage and salary workers in 2014 was $4,148 a year. You have to wonder how much care was denied to patients in order to afford those executive salaries. It also bears mentioning that some of these CEOs earned more by 10:30 a.m. on the first day of 2014 than the median household did during that entire year. Put in a different way, in order to pay out the compensation for Stephen Helmsley, the United Healthcare CEO, for 2014, nearly 4,000 families had to pay the fullest $351 amount for health care that year. And what sort of world should families have to pay close to a third of their total income to a single individual simply for the pleasure of having health insurance? Greedy doesn't begin to cover what's going on here. If ever there was sort of social contrast between and the public, it's now utterly broken by rewarding their upper management with tens of millions of dollars each, racking up healthcare premiums on families simply because they can. And now, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, you can now be fined for not forking over whatever insane price increases the healthcare cartel decide to dream up from their governmental protected boardrooms. Bizarrely, the healthcare insurance option in many states have been vastly reduced as carriers claiming losses, while massive premium increases have been justified also on the basis of losses and reduced profits. I say bizarrely because you'd imagine, being a regular person, that such losses should show up in actual profit declines for the insurers. Nope. Making a killing under Obamacare, the ACA gets blamed for rising premiums, while insurance companies are reaping massive profits. This insert here was from October 28th of 2016. It says, while Americans continue to be hammered by rising health costs, and while congressional lawmakers with the taxpayer subsidized health care do nothing to lower the cost of pharmaceuticals and medical care, one group is reaping a windfall in profit: health insurance companies and their investors. On Thursday, Aetna reported $734 million in profits on $15.8 billion in revenue for the 3 months that ended September 30th. The nation's third largest health insurer by revenue handily beat Wall Street estimates for the quarter. Aetna's earnings report came back a week after United Health reported 12% jump in revenue to $46.3 billion for the 3 months that ended September 30th, compared with the same period the previous year. The company collected $36.1 billion in insurance premiums, a sum 11% higher than for the year ago quarter, while profits increased 29% to $1.98 billion. A salon analyst of regulatory findings found that the top 5 health insurers, United Healthcare, Anthem, Aetna, Humana, and Cigna, have doled out nearly $30 billion in stock buybacks and dividends from 2013 to 2015. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Affordable Care Act in 2012. Similar strong results were noted for Humana in the last earnings release. So how can it be that all these companies are both reporting the need for massively higher premiums while also booking higher and higher profits? Well, when you live in a country that routinely subjects its citizens to racketeering, this is exactly what sort of disconnect you have to live with. They say one thing, but you see with your own eyes or experience with your own wallet something completely different. Obama's main failing in the ACA was in not going directly after the powerful insurance industry and forcing its players to participate in the reduction of waste and sharing the costs. Instead, they got more than a free pass. They got millions of new enrollees with the right to withdraw from any markets and exchanges when they felt their massive profits might take a ding. And withdraw they did, with 2 million people losing their coverage for 2017 due to major carriers pulling out of state exchanges. Cost of healthcare alone, we can detect massive fraud and deceit being foisted on the American public today. What emerges from these many rackets is a coercion of the social contract. In a word, these arrangements are abusive. The enormous pressures we see across the globe, with the rise of what the mainstream news outlets, such as the largest purveyors of fake news, are trying to label as nationalism, are really in large measure simply a reaction to economic oxygen having been sucked away from the populace of various countries and delivered into the hands of a very tiny elite who controls the news and therefore the narrative. But increasingly, people are waking up and deciding for themselves wrong. not unlike a person slowly becoming aware that they have somehow fallen into and been the victim of an abusive relationship. Let me be clear, if we do not somehow find the courage and appropriate leadership to begin righting these wrongs, this trajectory ends in tears. And it shouldn't be up to a government body to have to regulate proper action. The insurance companies themselves should have nobody but themselves to blame if they fail to self-regulate. Corporation that's running various rackets using a combination of predatory pricing, overly complex practices, and regulatory capture to operate as a cartel. If the elites don't manage to figure out how to contain their greed, then an angry electorate is just the beginning of their troubles. Anybody seeking to understand the political landscape needs to spend a little time on the eroding prosperity of the bottom 99% over the past 20 years. And then they have a part 2 to this article that I'm going to leave it up to you to read if you're interested in going further with this. It's how to fix the future, how to lay out critical movement in a rising time in history. So that is part of this. If you want to pull it up, there's a link to it here at the bottom of this article. I thought that this was very enlightening and something that we really need to pay attention to. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media. It helps to wake other people up that may not be awake, or to help the awakened be more alert to what's going on. Be sure and subscribe. Click the little bell next to the subscription box and check that little box, and that way you'll get email alerts every time I put a show up and you'll stay informed.